Back when I was a kid, I used to spend my summers in this cute little summer house by the sea. It was essentially a tea house for some rich folk back in the pre-war times. It was in the deeper side of a weirdly shaped yard, where it was effectively completely hidden from the outside world, and it was a nice little getaway. And in the yard, there was a great big jasmine bush. At times, me and my friend would cut out bits in the bush to make ourselves a makeshift secret base that we could make our hideout. There wasn't really a reason to do it, we had nothing to really hide away from. But it was fun and, weirdly enough, thrilling regardless. I remember doing that on many occasions. Probably couldn't do it anymore considering how much bugs unnerved me, but I didn't seem to care at the time. Point being, it was a nice, calm little getaway. It gave me a feeling I haven't been able to replicate for a long time. Until now. Going into Valheim, I absolutely didn't anticipate to be brought back to that childhood glee. If anything, I thought that the game would get boring and stale just a few hours in. I was proven quite wrong. Not only did I stick with the game, I enjoyed it. Apart from maybe a few things. There's several things I want to touch on when it comes to the world of Valheim. It's oddly cozy, hygge, if you will, and I think it's worth paying a visit. But to explain what makes it cozy, I'll break this video down in parts. What is cozy? I remember there was a bit where everyone was suddenly really getting into hygge, the Danish concept of coziness. It often gets boiled down to being in a place that has lots of candles or dim light, being fairly confined, and often with terrible conditions outside. Very Danish. And while those definitely are a part of the equation, quite often, they aren't where you draw the line and call quits. It's more about creating the feeling of intimacy, having good people around you and not having to think about outside distractions. So, how does Valheim go about creating the feeling of hygge? I'll start with the big one. Trees and stuff. From the many games that I've played and experienced, none have come as close to making a forest feel like a forest quite like Valheim has. You're free to argue this with me, but the way Iron Gate has done these messy, hard to navigate forests hits just right. It might stem more from the fact that it's just what forests are like in my corner of the world, but the fact that there's just stuff lying around like branches and stones, berries and mushrooms, and that there's random trees and bushes everywhere. It just helps the forest of Valheim feel real. A problem I've been met with in other games, even properly realistic looking ones, is that nature often feels either too sterile or gameplay focused, with clear patches of tall grass for places you're supposed to sneak through or interact with somehow. Valheim just doesn't care, but that makes the places you visit feel coherent in a way most don't, and I like that. It also shows how different forested areas look depending on if they're natural or user-made, or where you've deforested hard. The real forests, especially the dark ones, feel nicely dense and hard to navigate at times. If you turned off the map, chances are you'd get lost. Quick. Heck, there were times when we got lost with the map. It's definitely helped by the way they've implemented their lighting and weather, which bring even more nuance to the nature. The meadows with their soft, swaying grass, for example. The only other game that immediately springs to mind that has done grass that felt as nice to look at was Breath of the Wild. There's nothing special to it, really, but that kinda makes it nicer. Sometimes you'd see attempts at mixing different batches of grass in games, but often they just stick out more because of it. I think a part of it is in how it just doesn't stand out too much. The graphics in general are quite brilliant in Valheim. Valheim leverages the PS1-ish aesthetic to a great level. Valheim's art style makes it so that nothing really demands more attention than it should, and everything feels coherent. There are places where it does look silly if you think too much about it or try to look at everything as realistic. Like how mining cliffs just cuts out weird chunks in them, or how things can clip together in buildings. But for the most part, and especially if you don't get too sweaty about it, elements in the game blend together nicely. A thing I noted and particularly enjoy the look of is water. The mechanics of it can be a little jank, but it looks so good. When standing away from the water, you can see the sheen of the sky and you can't peer into what's beneath the surface. But as you approach the shore, or even better yet, swim through it, the riverbeds and the seafloors reveal themselves to you. There isn't much beneath the water, but I don't know, I like the sand and the rocks and the occasional something. I know it doesn't sound like much, and maybe it isn't, but somehow it feels like an excellent approximation of real water. It follows its own logic and looks good, and really, that's all it takes sometimes. And I gotta say, staring at the sea when there's a storm happening? Mesmerizing. Heck, most weather in the game is great to look at. That's why I built a slightly game-breaking watchtower just to take it all in. There's more to the nature than I've shown off, but I want to keep some of it as a surprise because it's an experience seeing the other biomes for yourself. But with those... Valheim isn't really a welcoming place. Like, at all. The first time I joined the server our friends had going, I was almost immediately attacked by the local wildlife with no real way of protecting myself. I think I built a club or something, but it hardly did anything to the creatures around me. It was brutal. We even died on the way to the first base they had set up. Wherever you go, the game keeps upping the ante and making the world feel more and more hostile. Every new zone comes with new challenges to overcome that each come packing a punch. Some never really stop. You're never really in the clear. As you deck yourself out in better gear and think you're ready for what it has to offer, something will inevitably come around and prove you wrong. And you're not really ever truly safe even when you build your settlements. One of the earlier moments of the game was when my friends had just built up their first makeshift house. They didn't even know how to do it properly, so it was even more devastating when they were suddenly beset upon by a troll that not only killed several of them, but also managed to wreck the house they had built. Building structures does keep lesser mobs away from you and can provide a sense of safety, and some later building materials also make sure that your houses remain sturdy against even bigger attacks. But that brings me to... It's fine to make something that works and call it a day, but it's awesome seeing what kinds of structures people come up with. Some people in the Valheim community make things that are genuinely impressive, but it's even better trying to make some of your own. And not just because creating things is fun, but because you get to make something that feels homely. It's not just visual either. Sure, having dim lighting and wooden architecture helps, but it's the feeling of being safe, of being cozy in these created spaces that sells it. It's not like you even have to try that much for it, or can try. There aren't that many decorations you can place, so it's all mostly functional pieces. Valheim has requirements for creating a space you can properly inhabit and use. They help with making your living space feel right. You need a fire, you need a roof, and you need to make sure it isn't too exposed. Though you can hack stuff together till it gets taken care of. Heck, even the lovingly named Karakden that stands as a testament in our first village can at times feel cozy, though that's more of a sitting in the bushes secret base with your buddies vibe than that of an actual house. Me and my friends have made 3 cities and several smaller settlements, and I kinda want to show them off, at least briefly, because why not? It'll help show off a part of what makes Valheim so enticing. The first town we made is right on the border of a black forest near our original spawn. There's a workshop house that used to be the house of one of our friends but eventually grew too full of stuff to be inhabitable. Then there's my original house that my friend built for me and I just kept on renovating. This here's my first build, which was a watchtower. That's just nowhere near the level of my later one that I showed before. That's just how first builds go. We of course can't forget about the Kraken. It's the first house that was built and just served as a space for spawning for a good number of our friends for a while. We also built a dock that we eventually connected to our portal hub. We have our item warehouse that no one really ended up using, and our smelting cooking space. The world's most inefficient farm. Our friend's house that also served as the go-to spot for beekeeping. The workshop friend's new house that also has the only toilet that has been built on the server, just for aesthetic purposes. I especially love the deck outside though. The last thing that we properly built here before moving on was a great big gathering hall. It never really saw a lot of use after it was finished. Making it was a real headache, so I still sometimes stop by to look over the city, most of which has been slowly stripped clean of resources. The site isn't that great usually, as all the lights are out, but when they are lit, the town becomes something else entirely. From there we had made some smaller bases whilst traveling, of which none really remained in regular use, though I still love that we have them. Our second city was born somewhat out of necessity and randomly became bigger than we had anticipated. It was made by refurbishing and improving upon an already existing dwelling that was there. We cleared the village from Draugr that were there and added onto it with the purpose of exploring a new biome. It mostly consists of a mead hall, a portal house, and then various storage spaces. But as we lived there, we added in more superfluous things like a fancy pier and my previously mentioned watchtower. There's also a pretty nice pig enclosure, and I can't forget, slight spoilers for a later biome, the stairs. We built a large, elaborate staircase, complete with campfires along the way, to get up and down the local mountain for gathering resources. It was one of the most fun builds we've made. I just loved the functionality of it. Before we moved on, my friend also planted plenty of trees and added extra structures just to make the place feel even nicer. Make it feel lived in. Our third and final city is still in progress, but it feels even more important. There's plenty of dangers around, and we are using everything we've learned along the way to make it even better than ever. For starters, we have a small watchtower that my friend made that just defies all we knew about the game's architecture up until then. The gathering house I created that keeps all the main functionality confined to a single space, so we don't have to run around too much to build tools and get sleep. There's even a cooking and potion brewing station. And then we have the docks and the castle, where we celebrate our victories. The rest we are still building out, mostly for flavor and the fun of it. Despite my initial doubts, I can wholeheartedly say that Valheim is well worth playing for just how good it can feel to explore. From just the sights, to how empowered you feel when you're finally able to brave new areas, it's definitely worth giving Valheim a go, even if it's just to build a hut in the woods and chill for a bit around a campfire, or go sailing, at least when the wind is in your favor. Hope you enjoy your time with it the same as me and my friends did. If this is the first video of mine you've seen, welcome. I'm Sysnax and I make videos talking about games and virtual environments that I feel are worth exploring. I'm still kind of finding my feet with these videos, but if you enjoyed this one, check out some of my older videos and maybe stick around for ones to come soon. Hopefully I can bring you more content that you will enjoy and maybe help you discover games that you might not have considered otherwise. Oh, and leave a comment if there's any game you think I should cover. See ya.